Hello, welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain and logistics industry. And this week it's just going to be me talking about breaking down the barriers to supply chain and logistics collaboration. Collaboration is one of those buzz terms that year in and year out really generates a lot of interest among shippers, among 3PLs. Certainly you can't go to a logistics or supply chain conference without having collaboration be part of the agenda in one way or another, or part of the conversation. And it's one of those things that in my 15 years as an analyst and working with shippers, working with 3PLs, um, there's a lot of talk around collaboration, but not as much walk, right? Not as much walk. And you can certainly point to success stories out there, but you can certainly point to many more, failures or false starts. So why is that? Um, and part of the reason is, there is a lot of excitement. Part of the reason there's a lot of excitement around collaborations is that shippers recognize that there is a huge opportunity for cost savings, for efficiencies out there. They know that they are leaving money on the table with regards to not collaborating more effectively. But the challenge is, once you get that excitement and you all go into the room and try to then figure out next steps and start really peeling back the onion in terms of how do you make collaboration work. That's when kind of reality sinks in and you realize that it's not that easy. There's a lot of questions, there's a lot of work involved, and there's a lot of challenges involved in terms of making it work right. And that's where, again, that early enthusiasm and excitement then starts to dissipate and go away. I often say, collaboration is like a mountain, and people are at their base and they're looking up and they can see, it's going to be a great view from up there. That's going to be the prize, to get up there and see the beautiful view and capture those savings and those productivity improvements. But you've got to work to get up there, right? You've got to climb through various rocks and boulders and other challenges along the way to get to that top of that mountain. And it's the same, that's true with collaboration. You just don't get from the base to the top without some investment of time, some investment of effort, some homework, and some work involved. Um, that said, I do see the needle, begin to move on collaboration. And kind of what I've been saying lately is, there's that saying that necessity is the mother of invention. So I've kind of tweaked that and said necessity is or will be the mother of collaboration. Um, Mainly because if you look at some of the driving forces out there along with regards to transportation, capacity concerns with hours of service and CSA, and certainly as the economy picks up, and the fact that many a lot of capacity exited the market, and a lot of trucking companies haven't been adding capacity. A lot of shippers are concerned that there is going to come a time where the capacity crunch is going to hit. So collaboration is kind of an area that they see as an opportunity to kind of mitigate that risk from a capacity standpoint. Sustainability again is another area where a lot of companies are launching sustainability initiatives. And in some ways, I was having a conversation with folks, and they were saying that kind of collaborative efforts seem to have more traction or a longer history of success in Europe than here in the United States. And I believe part of the reason for that is because of the sustainability environment over in Europe, and a lot of the regulatory environment over there, the cost impacts of not being green, and so on and so forth. I think has been a catalyst for companies to really pursue collaboration, more vigorously over in Europe than over here. And then the reality is that you can only squeeze so much juice out of the low-hanging fruit in terms of cost savings and productivity. So as shippers are looking for what's the next frontier for cost savings, for productivity improvements, so on and so forth, collaboration, is still kind of that missed opportunity that they're looking to capture. Um, so what I want to do today is really just share quickly, what some of these barriers are to collaboration that I see and that I hear from shippers, and then kind of share with you just some thoughts in terms of recommendations based on kind of some of the success stories that I've seen out there. But certainly only going to be scratching the surface today on this important topic. Let me start by kind of looking at the definition of collaboration, I've got a short one here from Wikipedia that I thought is pretty good. And the definition is a recursive process where two or more people or organizations work together to realize shared goals. Now, there's two phrases in this short definition that I think are important. The first one is shared goals, and I think that's where that's really the first hurdle that many companies have to overcome, because unless your goal and the company or the organization you're looking to collaborate with have the same goal, you're sharing the same goal. If there's misalignment there, that's going to create issues and challenges in terms of making it work. So you may want to be, you may want to collaborate for cost reasons because you believe that you can extract some additional cost savings, by co-loading freight with other shippers or doing multi-stop shipments with other shippers. But if the partner or the party that you're looking to collaborate with, if their main driving force is around sustainability, let's say, if their main driving force is around service improvement, or risk management. Like I mentioned earlier, they're looking at this as a way to mitigate potential capacity constraints down the road. So they're looking to kind of get collaborative efforts going now to kind of mitigate that. Um, so again, if your partners, prospective partners, primary driving goals for collaborator are those things, and yours is cost, well, that misalignment there is going to create some problems and issues, and more than likely will result in the relationship not even going forward. So really, the first step is really understanding that whoever you collaborate with, you really have to define and come up with a shared goal and be in agreement with what those goals are and what the expectations are and what the desired outcomes are, and there's got to be alignment, between those things. The other key word in this definition is recursive. It's the reality that the when you start a collaborative relationship, it's going to be different 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road, a year down the road than it is today when you first get started, because business change, your networks change, operating realities change, exceptions occur, so on and so forth. So it really is an ongoing recursive process that you got to continually, manage. You have to continually look to improve and innovate around. So it's not something that you kind of set up on day one and then you're done. You're off and running with collaboration. It really is an ongoing investment and an ongoing work involved in terms of making collaboration work. So I like that definition. I think it's important to keep those two ideas in terms of shared goals and it being a recursive process in mind as you move forward with this. Um, and talking about kind of the shared goals piece, I mean, that's really where um, a lot of these collaborative opportunities fall apart. And if you think about manufacturers and retailers, for example, if you're trying to collaborate, with one of your customers, if you're manufacturing, you're trying to collaborate with a retail partner, I mean, you can see those conflicting goals, very readily, right? I mean, if you're a retailer, ideally you'd like to order in small quantities and have more frequent deliveries, right? And you like to be a little bit more dynamic and make some last minute changes. That's in complete conflict with the way manufacturers ideally would like to, operate, right? Manufacturers would like to have, large orders, full truckload orders. They like to deliver less frequently as opposed to more frequently. And certainly, last minute changes create some challenges for them. So even looking at shipper, manufacturer retail collaboration, not only in transportation but in other areas, I think when you look at just the fact that manufacturers and retailers have different priorities or different ways that they want to work. I mean, that's been another big inhibiting factor. And then finally is that everyone sees that top of the mountain, right? They see those benefits, but nobody wants to. They all want the benefits, but they don't want any of the costs or the risks or the investments involved in getting there, right? So what you've typically seen over the years is people pushing up those costs and pushing up those risks and the effort up the supply chain, right? So retailers try to push those up to manufacturers. Manufacturers try to push those costs and risks up to their suppliers, and so on and so forth. And again, that's been the nature of supply chain management since I've been involved in researching it. And again, kind of moving away from that, trying to, push costs and risks and responsibilities to, up the stream. For collaboration and work, you really have to take a holistic perspective, really take in almost develop a joint business plan, with the parties that you're looking to collaborate with. And it's less about, what's in it for you, and it's more of what's in it for, for the collective parties that are involved with this. Um, so at the end of the day, there's three, basic questions as you get started or thinking about collaboration that you have to ask and think about. And I'm not going to go into all detail into these questions, but the basic question is, why collaborate? And that gets to the point that I talked about earlier in terms of having that shared goals, and really think through in terms of what is the primary driving, force that is, pointing you or leading you to look for opportunities to collaborate with other parties out there. And with who, right? Do you collaborate with a customer? Do you collaborate with a supplier? Do you collaborate with other shippers in your industry, or with other industries? Do you collaborate more in a one-to-one environment, or are you looking for opportunities where, many shippers, you can collaborate with many shippers, serving many customers? So again, a lot of different, models, involved with that, which gets to the how question. You know, which model do you adopt? Which is the easiest, or the where the opportunity lies the greatest relative to your objectives? Um, and then, how, right? Do you do it directly with another shipper, or the other party, or do you involve a third party to help facilitate that, like a third party logistics company, or a supply chain operating network that has many shippers and, trading partners as part of the network that can help facilitate, the introduction and the execution of a collaborative relationship. So again, I'm not going to go into the full details, or into each of those questions, but those are really the basic, questions that you have to ask and think through, before you get into that conference room, before you get into kind of start executing, that process. So I'm going to talk about now where I'm going to focus the bulk of my time here today is really focus on, six of the key barriers that I see, and just quickly make some comments about them. And again, I think it's important to recognize what those barriers are, and for you to, think through them in terms of how you might overcome them. And then I'll provide some my own thoughts along those lines as well. So let's talk about, the first barrier, which is, finding, a shipper, or and again, this is with regards to transportation collaboration. Finding a shipper or another party that, has compatible freight and network, with yours. Um, a lot of times what I've seen is, a director of transportation at one company may know, through meeting at maybe they met at a conference, maybe it's a former colleague that they used to work with, and they reach out to them and say, hey, look, it looks like you might have a similar network to mine, you might have compatible freight to mine, and why don't we explore to see if there's opportunities for us to collaborate together. So it's kind of that peer-to-peer, um, catalyst, if you will, to find that, partner. More commonly, I do see 3PLs kind of being the source of that, where obviously they work with a lot of different, shippers and a lot of different carriers, and they've got visibility to the different networks, and they have visibility to where they might be backhaul opportunities, or where they might be multi-stop opportunities, and they can serve as that, catalyst to help, identify, at least on paper, the ideal, some perspective, collaborative partners that you might have. And certainly, like I mentioned before, supply chain operating networks um, have a similar opportunity because of their technology platform. You've got multiple, shippers and carriers and other trading partners executing transportation on a common technology platform. They also have visibility to identify those opportunities. What I think is important here is that it really goes beyond, finding the right partner really goes beyond, um, finding a partner that has compatible freight and network. I mean, that's kind of a those are key elements of it. But it's also important that the two companies really come at it from the same mindset. Um, this is something I talk about with regards to vested relationships. And when you talk about collaborative relationships, it really is a form of a vested relationship. And the common thread that I see between successful vested relationships is that the companies involved each have a very strong culture of continuous improvement. Uh, as an example, a strong Lean Six Sigma culture, where it's part of their DNA to look for continuous improvement opportunities, for ways to, um, you know, uh, find cost savings opportunities, productivity improvements. So if you can find a partner that again has that same culture and mindset towards continuous improvement, that speaks that language that you already speak, I think that's another critical element there beyond just having compatible freight and network. So again, one of the challenges is finding the right partner, and how do you do that, and the different ways of doing that. The second one is the big barrier is determining how to share risks and rewards. And I think this is probably one of the biggest stumbling blocks there. And it's something that really, at the end of the day, the way to do that is really to be transparent and forthcoming with each other in terms of understanding where each party's coming from a cost perspective, from a service perspective, what each needs to do to make it work, and really talk through all those things. So at the end of the day, there is an equitable distribution of not only the benefits, but also of the investment in time and resources and so on that's involved, to make it work. So really coming through, I think the key word here is really transparency and communication, to really um, upfront, um, uh, come to an agreement on how, again, not only the benefits are going to be distributed, but the risks and the investments involved. The third, barrier is, folks simply don't have the time or resources to make it work, right? So, maybe, like I mentioned, once they get into the conference room and they start, and all excited with, trying to get a collaborative relationship going. Then when they start peeling back the onion, they realize, boy, this is going to take some work, right? This is going to require some people to be involved. There's going to be some, analysis that needs to take place. We need to get into, we need to gather data. We need to, like I just mentioned earlier, work through how we're going to share risks and rewards and costs and so on and so forth. And a lot of companies say, you know what, we just don't have the time or the resources to do this. Um, how do we justify this? Obviously, one approach to justifying it is to, quantify the business opportunity, the value, and then compare that to the investment in time and resources that will be required to do this. So that helps with justifying moving forward and making that investment in time and resources. But secondly, I mean, this is where again, third-party logistics providers, supply chain operating networks, and other third parties. I've seen universities be involved as kind of a third-party facilitator to help do some of that analysis, help provide kind of be that facilitator to help the two parties really discuss and work through those early questions in analysis. So again, so I think one of the things that kind of turns some companies and organizations off to collaboration is that there is work involved, and they feel like they don't have the time or the resources. So you have to really think through, are you going to do this internally? And if so, what are you going to need to do to kind of help justify to upper management why you need to invest the time and resources to do this? And the way you do that, obviously, is by quantifying the business opportunity or the ROI of doing this. Or secondly, this is an opportunity to work with your 3PL partners or any third party that has experience and expertise in helping to facilitate collaborative opportunities. The fourth barrier kind of goes back to the definition of collaboration that I talked about, where it's a recursive process, and it's really defining up front or thinking through up front how how are you going to deal with the exceptions? Because if there's one guarantee, to any collaborative relationship, is that there will be exceptions. Things are not going to go as planned all the time, and things are going to continuously change. So really understanding how are you going to deal with exceptions when they occur, right? Who's going to be responsible? Who's going to take a lead on certain things? Um, if it's one party that creates an exception, how is that going to be handled? If it's the other party, how is that going to be handled? One of the great phrases that I heard a couple of years ago at a conference that I was involved with regards to a collaborative relationship, and it was more around the S&OP process, doing a collaborative S&OP process, and the presenters kind of refer to themselves as PITAs, and I hadn't heard that phrase before, being a PITA. And a PITA stands for, and some of you may know, but PITA stands for pain in the ass. And they talked about how you really need a PITA at both, at all the different parties involved to kind of keep pushing through to make these things work, right? So you need a point person that's going to be the main go-to person in each of the organizations, that when these exceptions occur, or when things are, when one party might be falling behind on their commitments and so on, that PITA is going to be the person, that the point person to go to and make sure that each party is meeting their responsibilities, that both parties are communicating effectively, so on and so forth. So again, thinking through how you're going to manage the exceptions when they occur, and having a plan up front, or a discussion up front of how that's going to happen. Because the last thing you want to do is not have had that discussion ahead of time, and then as you get moving forward with it, exceptions occurring and no one knowing what to do, or worse, getting into the blame game and pointing fingers, and then that's certainly a recipe for things to fall apart very, very quickly. The fifth barrier, is resistance from upper management. Again, it's a cultural change. I think we've been a lot of companies have been so ingrained in terms of keeping control over things, that the talk of sharing capacity or sharing information with another shipper, it kind of just, you don't get that warm fuzzy feeling in the stomach, because it is kind of a break from the norm. I remember years and years ago there was a 3PL that was delivering service parts in the automotive industry for both GM and Ford. And as all these automotive dealerships, they have the auto miles, and they're all kind of located next to each other. So you have a Ford dealership right next to a GM dealership. They actually had to send separate trucks, to make those deliveries, because GM and Ford early on, did not want their freight commingled. Even though obviously there will be savings opportunities if one truck can go out and make the multiple stops along that auto mile. Ultimately, they were able to break down that barrier and collaborate. But again, I mean, something that seems kind of obvious to do, and you talk about service parts here. Again, it took a long time for that, for those barriers to come down to be able to do that. And again, the same thing, you see the same thing here. Even though you may justify, and obviously that's a key important here, is to quantify the business opportunity. Even though you may quantify the business opportunity, there may be some persuasion that's required to really say, to kind of move away from the way we've always done things. And then finally, the other barrier that I see is resistance. It's lack of supporting technology. This is an area that I think is becoming less of an issue, particularly with software as a service, or supply chain operating networks, as I referenced before, because really now with the more modern technology platforms out there that both supply chain operating networks as well as 3PLs have, being able to gather the necessary data to identify the right partners, the ability to execute some of these collaborative shipments, because they're running off a single platform, a shared platform. All those things make it arguably easier today than perhaps a few years back. But again, thinking about technology, how which technology are you going to use? How is technology going to play a role here? You may have a TMS, your prospective partner might have a TMS. how are you going to execute, how are you going to share information, or if you're both working with the same 3PL or same supply chain operating network partner, well then obviously there's some benefits there, because you're already both on the same platform. But again, you got to think through the technology piece and how data and information is going to be exchanged. So those are kind of the main barriers that I see with regards to collaborative relationships. Now I just want to kind of close with just some final thoughts. The first one is going back to the finding the right partner. There's a variety of different factors that you have to look into. So I mentioned compatibility of the freight and network. In terms of the freight, you're looking at product density. You're looking at product value. We if you look at Talking Logistics, if you go to the Talking Logistics website, we did an episode early this year with Dow Tile and Transplace, where they talked about their really collaborative relationship with some other shippers. And one of the things that that came out of that conversation was that Dow Tile actually had identified a partner to collaborate with that matched beautifully from a network standpoint, from a product density standpoint. There was a good match there. But really, what kind of prevented, what turned out to be the factor that prevented them from moving forward with a particular prospective partner was they had vastly different product values, right? So in the case of the prospective partner, transportation as the transportation cost as a percent of revenues was so small that the benefits of collaboration for them, was not going to be significant enough for them to make that investment. So there's another factor, right? Product value and whether the benefits are going to be significant enough for both parties entering into this. And then of course, like I mentioned before, the alignment of mindset is critically important. The second thing, just to underscore the point I made earlier, is you really have to define upfront shared goals and expected outcomes, because you want to go into it both being in alignment on that front versus one party looking for significant cost savings and another party mainly doing it for, let's say, sustainability or risk management reasons. And again, unless you have that alignment, that could create some friction or some challenges in moving the relationship forward. Transparency. You've got to create have a transparent cost model up front that allows all the parties to know what the benefits are going to be, how those benefits are calculated, and how they're where they came from and how they're going to be shared and distributed. So unless you have that transparency up front, and those are the types of things you have to kind of discuss right at the beginning and define and really come to an agreement with. That's where unless you have that, that's where some challenges can come up later on, where you might feel that you're not getting a fair share of the benefits, or you don't understand why you're getting X amount and your partner's getting another amount. So really developing the cost model, making that transparent, and have everybody understand where the numbers are coming from, if you will, is critically important. Determine a process for dealing with exceptions. I talked about that already, and again, you got to talk about that up front, because you don't want to figure that out as you go when things don't go as planned. And like I said, guaranteed things will not go as planned. Communicate, communicate, communicate. I mean, that is common sense in any relationship, that you want to communicate clearly, you want to communicate often, you want to communicate honestly with one another. Again, this is where a third-party facilitator can help. This is where having those PITAs that I talked about can help. But communication is key. And then finally, some of the success stories I've seen, that they've really started small, and then they learn from that experience, and then they iterate. And starting small can actually be, going back to the point that I didn't mention earlier on in terms of finding the right partner. Starting small may be starting internally. The right partner may be, a sister business unit within your own company, or it may be working, within your, trying to collaborate better between your common carrier part of your network with your private fleet part of your network, right? So starting small and finding the right partner may involve working internally first and trying to, work through the process of collaborating and communicating and, sharing, defining desired outcomes and so forth. So again, don't try to go for the big bang here in trying to, collaborate on a large scale. Really start small so that you can learn and you can iterate, along the way and then grow from there. And if you're starting internally, that's probably the best place. That's the kind of the, if you think of a crawl, walk, run mentality, internally is kind of the crawl. And then once you take your learnings from your internal experience, then you can take those and start exploring external collaborative opportunities. Um, like I mentioned before, having a third-party facilitator helps in all of this. And finally, and just as importantly, I really didn't talk about this much, don't forget about the role of carriers. I mean, there are a very important piece of the puzzle here. So you have to involve them early on. Um, have them bring their ideas and their concerns, and have them be involved in terms of their shared, what their expected goals and benefits and outcomes of this will be. So very, very important, not to leave, the carriers out in the cold or bringing them in after the fact. The earlier and the sooner you can bring the carriers, your carriers, or those that you think will be the ones you want to work with as part of a collaborative relationship, the sooner you can bring them into the process, the higher the probability for success that you will have. So that wraps up my thoughts on breaking down the barriers to collaboration. Again, this is a very meaty topic. Kind of just scratched the surface here. But certainly, if you've got any questions or comments, go to the website talkinglogistics.com and find this episode if you're watching this on demand, and post a question there, and I'll be happy to answer the question or provide some added perspective. So again, thank you very much for joining me today, and certainly look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.